and welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a program on KSQD 90.7 FM. Today's guest is Kat Salehi, and we will discuss a point of light in the housing crisis in Santa Cruz. The Santa Cruz Garden Women's Shelter is a grassroots organized and funded overnight safe space for women facing houselessness in Santa Cruz. The goal is for residents to recognize their power and uplift each other. It offers stability, accountability, and a supportive community of women. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. Why don't we start off with saying how and why did the Secret Garden Women's Shelter get started and how long it has been in existence?
The Secret Garden Women's Shelter is an all-volunteer organization that is under the umbrella of Warmingcenterprogram nonprofit that operates on Felker Street in Santa Cruz. And we, over the summer, had the access to available empty space that was a very, very affordable rent, especially in Santa Cruz. And we were wondering what to do with that space. And one of the ideas was women's shelter. It meets the Warming Center program's mission statement that is to identify the unmet needs of homelessness and meet them, as well as just trying to mitigate the negative impacts of houselessness, both for unhoused and housed people in the communities of Santa Cruz. And we saw the unmet need that women disproportionately as a socially marginalized group in the world need extra safety and security when they're sleeping outside, and having an overnight safe and secure, stable place for women to be can oftentimes offer just that extra level of dignity and stability that they need to then be able to start to work on other things in their lives that otherwise just being in survival mode doesn't necessarily allow.
And I understand you had an event and you sent out flyers and people came, and what happened?
So we used Warming Center Program's already wide support community to offer a summer salads fundraising event that was hosted by one of our core 11 female volunteers who helped kind of instigate the Secret Garden Women's Shelter over the summer, over the course of May and June and July. And it was a really successful event that garnered a lot of fundraising, but also just a show of serious community support to see this outpouring of love from people who clearly also saw this as a need that needed to be met. And that was really, really valuable to have. In addition, we had a GoFundMe that raised over $10,000. And we also just received community donations. And another volunteer and I also did a radio show on K-Squid before we opened. So through those means, we were able to raise over $30,000 over the course of just a few months. And it's just been truly remarkable to see how grassroots and community-led this has truly been, when a lot of these types of programs don't get off the ground without any type of city funding.
And when did you open with the Secret Garden Women's Shelter?
After a couple months of planning, we finally opened, I believe, around July 20th. So we've been fully operational for about 4 months.
Yeah. Let's go and get a little bit more information about what percentage of people living on the street are from Santa Cruz.
So the most recent data I have is from the 2019 point-in-time count that the city of Santa Cruz contracts out to a company that does these surveys. And unfortunately, there was supposed to be one this past year, but due to the pandemic, there wasn't. Right. And while people have critiques of the point-in-time count, it is the most accurate way for me to find information about this. So 74% of those who were surveyed said that they had been living in Santa Cruz prior to becoming homeless. And 34% of those people had been living in Santa Cruz for 10 or more years.
So we can dispel the myth that we're just attracting people from elsewhere that want to live of our good hearts. And I think that's important for people to know. And so you said there are specific needs for women experiencing houselessness in Santa Cruz. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Women, of course, are just more susceptible to things that all women are in this world, like domestic violence and assault, and more prone to being victims of theft, which is very common amongst certain groups of homeless people. Also being taken advantage of as far as drug abuse, and just being particularly vulnerable and scared.
So then you start the program. You have to select women. You cannot take in all women. How did the selection process established?
So we wanted to create a place where each resident could call their bed their home. And instead of having like a drop-in shelter where it's a night-by-night basis, we do an informal intake or interview process in which we show you the space, and then we discuss what the needs of the space are and the basic agreements that we have and why the space is set up the way it is and how it works. And then we talk to you a little bit about what are your needs? What is your situation? What is your addictive substance of choice? What is your mental health? What does your relationship to mental health services look like? And it is not a judgment. It is not, no answer that you give is a clear-cut acceptance or denial into the shelter. It is more of having a conversation about an understanding of, does the shelter meet your needs? And can you meet the basic needs of the shelter and adhere to some of the basic agreements? So it's pretty much do we work well together? And will you be able to live in a dorm-style community setting?
And do you keep in mind also the women that you're interviewing, what group could work together? What group of women could work together? Do you include that?
As of late, we've been trying to do that a little bit more. But as someone who has been doing a lot of the interviewing, it has been a little bit of trial and error. I had no prior experience in this line of work of running an all-volunteer shelter. I don't have a master's in social work, but I have been learning as I've been going, and I've been thinking a lot about who seems to be inclined to be community-oriented and who seems to be able to want to be involved in something that is bigger than themselves, that is not just about themselves. That being said, I think it can be hard to shift from sometimes like a survival mode to thinking about having stability and now being able to thrive. And it's definitely not something universal to all of the residents, but I think that just that shift in mindset is something that is hard for people to internalize and can take a little while. But it's been beautiful to see even like some of those transformations happen in people over the course of the past few months.
And so when you and I first talked, to do this program, you mentioned that you kind of used the information, talk with people at the warming center. They gave you some ideas. You asked people in the street. I mean, you actually went to women in the street and asked them what they might need, which I find very unique because often we say, okay, well, here's this and here's the rules and this is what you're going to do in order to be here tonight. And you took an approach of first asking what they would need. And can you say a little bit more about that, your experience with that?
So when we were first planning the women's shelter as like the 11 core volunteers and Warmingcenterprogram director, Brent Adams, and we were discussing these things, one of the things that came to my mind was just the conversations that I had casually with women at my workplace at Footbridge Services Center and where I volunteer at Food Not Bombs, and what people had told me in confidence and really just starting to theorize on those things. What are the common threads that have been in these narratives that people have been telling me and in their struggles? And it really helped to kind of give us the frame of mind of how do we want to go about doing this and what is the most empowering way of going about doing this. Oftentimes, the way that shelters pan out is in very didactic and oftentimes kind of paternalistic ways. And some people might need a little bit more of that, but our hope was that through the lightest touch possible and just through having this intentionality and this framing around the building of the shelter, that people will kind of buy into that subconsciously and just be able to find power within themselves and really not need to be fully managed, but just have some kind of oversight through volunteers and through Warming Center program administrative assistants.
Let's be practical. For what number of hours are they staying each day? They're not there the whole day.
Yes. So due to the nature of the space that we're in and due to the all volunteer nature of our program, we're only able to offer overnight, but still pretty remarkable. There's a volunteer every evening who checks residents in between 6 and 8 p.m. So they're supposed to arrive within that 2-hour window for the night. And then there's another volunteer who arrives between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. the following morning to get them ready, make sure that they're out the door by 8 a.m. And that's when we lock up. So they have a solid 14 hours in the space if they were there for the full evening.
That's wonderful. And how many weeks, how many months? Is there a specific duration that they can actually use the facilities?
They're able to stay there as long as we remain a shelter. Our only limitation is that we are aware that the facility we're currently at will be demolished maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, due to the building of condominiums in its place. So that is really our only limitation. But even that won't necessarily determine the termination of the shelter. It will just maybe determine a newer iteration of it.
I like that kind of thinking. So I'm coming to the center as a woman who needs help. What do I find there? How does it look like?
So entering the shelter, you will find 4 rooms. There are 3 beds in each room, and then 1 really beautiful common room. The bedrooms include your own personal bed, storage space underneath, cabinets, and bedside lamps and tables, as well as every room has their own fridge that they share with their other roommates. And then the community room is this beautiful, warm, welcoming space that has a sink and plates and dishes, utensils, microwave, toaster oven, tables, sofa, coffee table, chairs. It's pretty much just like a really nice living room, honestly. Right. It has a really homey vibe, and it's been painted in a beautiful color.
Yes, yeah, I saw the picture, and we'll have this program on our podcast on ksqd.org, and then people will see some of the pictures. How many residents do you have right now?
We currently have 9 residents, and we recently expanded so we can offer up to 2 more spaces for a total of 11 residents. So we are still doing some intakes and interviews.
And you talk about volunteers coming in the evening. Is there a shelter facilitator?
Actually, one of the things that we wanted to do since we began was have one of the residents actually take on the role of a shelter facilitator. And that's not a manager, that's not a mom, that's not a boss, but it is merely someone who provides some cohesion and some thorough through line of communication between Warmingcenterprogram administrative people, the volunteers, and the shelter residents. And so we're proud to say that as of a couple weeks ago, we actually hired one of our residents as a shelter facilitator. She works a couple hours a week every single day, and then there's someone who can sub in if she needs to take a break. But her responsibility is just to exactly facilitate. She helps identify the needs of the community and community upkeep and encourage people to do them or assist them in being able to complete those tasks, as well as just being someone that can be the through line of communication for everybody and have some consistency. Because while it's beautiful that there are so many volunteers who are really passionate about being involved and have been graciously donating their time to this effort, it has ended up having a bit of a disconnect and a bit of a destabilizing event for the volunteers themselves and for the residents a little bit as far as communication goes. So this is supposed to help really improve and bolster that. And it's been doing it so far.
If you look back to July when you started and when you prepared for it, you hope for certain things to happen. How is it different now that you have been in existence for 4 months?
I think one of the things that we weren't certain about was just how much oversight or how much interpersonal relationship struggles that we would be anticipating when we opened. I think that we were more just focused on what is the worst case scenario, the worst thing that could possibly happen. And we are so grateful to say that the worst things that we thought would happen have not even come close to happening. And it's, in a way, it's kind of beautiful that the biggest issue that we have to worry about is that sometimes there's interpersonal relationship incongruencies and dynamics between the women. Sometimes in the moment, it's just really good to be able to take a step back and realize that instead of thinking about the worst case scenario, now we're just kind of dealing with how do we just keep talking about community and how do we keep talking about taking care of each other. And it's really beautiful to see the residents themselves really talking about that stuff and internalizing those messages. And a lot of them have come even with that belief, while sometimes it can be difficult to see it in praxis or in execution. Just people having the idea of that we cohabitate and we're living together and we may not always get along, or some of us might not even like each other that much, but we are our neighbors and we are roommates, and let's make this work. Let's try to create harmony here. And it's been really beautiful to see people who didn't know each other before this all of a sudden forming a family.
Well, I'd like to go into that a little bit deeper after this little break, because I am reminding our audience that they're listening to KSQD 90.7 FM also streaming live on ksqd.org. The program is Exploring Santa Cruz. I'm your host, Mathilde, and I'm here with Kat Salehi of the Secret Garden Women's Shelter Project. So let's talk a little bit about how the women are supporting each other. Are you making any specific agreements when women come in? Any general goals that you make sure that everybody has discussed?
So our basic agreements are more about things involving some ground line rules about violence and aggression and not tolerating that behavior and theft and, coming into the space on time and keeping your space relatively tidy and organized. The residents kind of got to decide for themselves what their agreements were, both as a group, but then within each room about when they wanted quiet hours and lights out. And how do you navigate people who might be struggling to adhere to that or might not even be in a position to be fully aware of what they're doing at all times and therefore might not necessarily be able to adhere to all that. But it's been all about extending patience to each other and really being able to see things from someone else's perspective and reminding yourself when someone is having a difficult time, what it was like when you were having a difficult time and how someone else treated you or how you wish you had been treated. And I really do notice people helping each other out materially through I was at the store and I saw this and I thought of you, or through helping each other just by listening, or even the most gentle touch or words of gratitude, or just even chit-chatting late at night because you're both up, or sharing food. The ladies, a lot of them enjoyed a meal together one evening recently, and they're going to have Thanksgiving together as well. So it's just those small things that end up really creating something that is bigger than the sum of its parts.
When we talked about goal setting. And that was very interesting to me because as an educator, I know that often in elementary school at 4th grade, teachers are starting to talk about goal setting, individual as well as for the whole class. Can you tell me a little bit about the individual goal setting that you are doing?
Our philosophy, both of the Warming Center program and that ends up imparting into the shelter, is not just about how do we just get you into a house, like a physical house that is yours, or an apartment, or a building that you live in, but rather you are here now, you are in a women's shelter, you have a safe and stable place. How do we think about healing ourselves and our community, and what does that look like, healing from the inside in a way that is far more substantive than just trying to treat symptoms, but rather identifying the needs you have within yourself and really starting to address them. So one of the things that we're starting to get off the ground is what we call an achievable goals program. It's not quite case management in the sense that we don't necessarily have a formal social worker, and we're not exactly trying to just get you in a Section 8 housing voucher and get you into housing, but we are trying to identify different needs that you have, whether it be related to family, education, your job, your mental health, substance use, and even housing is one of the components. And what are the things that you would like to do within those categories? What are some of the things that you would like to work on within yourself? And what is something that you could accomplish by the end of today? What is something that you can accomplish by tomorrow? And the hope is that with the stability of a place like this, you can start to think about yourself, not just in a day-to-day sense, but start to open up your mind to where would I like to see myself in 6 months? Where would I like to see myself in a year? In 5 years? How would I like to see myself growing inside? And what does that mean as far as how I take care of myself and how I take care of my fellow residents?
And is this done in a group setting or individual setting, one-on-one?
So what our plan is to have myself and a UCSC intern working individually with one resident at a time. It's kind of scheduling meetings with them maybe weekly or bi-weekly, where we are first just kind of delving into identifying your needs and then making tangible steps towards achieving those and just checking back in as a system of accountability. Whether it's anything from getting your ID to reconnecting with a family member to getting a job to getting your Section 8 housing voucher. It could be any and all of the above.
And in connection with all of what we just talked about, when we prepared for today's program, I heard you use the term interdependent autonomy. What does that mean, and how is the program working on that?
So to me, interdependent autonomy means understanding that you are your own person with your own perspective and your past and your history, and that is valuable in your own way of being and knowing and doing and understanding the world, but that you are inherently interconnected and rely on the people around you for everything that you have. And it's a beautiful thing that I think we all do when we accept that we are in a community that is much bigger than ourselves, that we need things that we cannot do ourselves. And that is actually a beautiful thing. It is not a debilitating thing. It's actually very empowering. So it's holding that balance and really shining it to the light, the fact that you are your own person and you're very capable as an individual and you're very powerful. But part of your power is in seeking out the help of your community and in understanding your oneness with your unintentional and intentional neighbors.
Future expansion.
We are thinking about possibly even expanding into more rooms that we currently have access to. That would be, we recently just did one expansion, so that might not be for a little while, but it's kind of always on the mind. One of the volunteers who really helped get the shelter off the ground has been talking about since the beginning doing more of a holistic healing and wellness program that focuses on non-Western ways of just healing, and her personal work is in that field, so that would really be helpful. One of the volunteers connected us to someone who actually offers yoga on Thursdays, which is super cool. And then there's been people who have been involved as far as providing food weekly to the residents, providing donations specifically for the residents, and just overall support that has been really remarkable. We might do another fundraising event at some point or some type of just awareness raising so that we can continue to provide financial compensation to our shelter facilitator. We never want to move to a fully managed framework of doing things because we do think that is not empowering. It doesn't really help people remember that they have their own autonomy and their own power, and they are capable and they are awesome, beautiful people, and that they have the capacity to heal.
How are you connecting women with other resources?
So currently we do have a homeless resources list that we are connecting people to. It just has a thorough list of different services that are available throughout the county, from things about physical health to mental health to showers, laundry, many of the things which Footbridge Services Center actually offers. So it's very easy for people to connect from the women's shelter to Footbridge Services Center, which is also part of Warmingcenterprogram. But in addition, it's just really been cool to see volunteers who do have experience and history in or currently are working in human services, being able to offer their knowledge and their support. One of the volunteers was able to help a resident navigate some of the difficulties of getting EBT, for example, but also residents being able to offer each other support and guidance in that. Our shelter facilitator is really big on certain programs like Recovery Cafe and MHCAN, and has been like, I'll take you there if you want to go with me. And she's one of the people who has a vehicle. So and then people just supporting each other, saying things like, oh, if you need to go to HPHP, I'll go with you. And it's been really cool to see that.
Absolutely. Building community. And talking about community, you're getting support from the community. You already told us that you have volunteers at night and in the morning. Is there a typical volunteer that is attracted or is encouraged to join?
We'll take any volunteer, honestly, who is not a cisgendered man, because we are a women's shelter. We do want it to be a grassroots, women-run, women-led shelter. And anyone who has any interest, you don't have to have any particular background or history in the work. You just have to have compassion for other people, which all of our volunteers do, because they're dedicating their time to something that's so beautiful to see coming together.
But of course, both men and women can support you financially.
Oh, absolutely.
How would that work?
You would go onto the website warmingcenterprogram.com, and there is a donate button that takes you to a PayPal account, in which I believe in the memos section, when you're entering your information, you can say for Secret Garden Women's Shelter or for the Women's Shelter. And you can also always send out checks to P.O. Box 462, Warming Center Program, Santa Cruz, California, 95061.
People can also communicate or contact warmingcenterprogram@gmail.com.
Correct, with any further inquiries you have.
Yeah. warmingcenterprogram@gmail.com. When you were talking, I was really envisioning that this is kind of a beginning of maybe many satellite small-scale shelters that could be developed in Santa Cruz. And now that you have a track record, what funding are you hoping for? Any government funding?
In light of the Camping Services and Standards Ordinance that the city had passed this past summer in Santa Cruz, they sent out a request for qualifications in which non-for-profits can apply to fulfill some of the needs iterated in the CSSO about before they can really fully bring it into action. So things like storage and specific types of shelter programs and like daytime services. And we actually applied for the city's RFQ for the women's shelter, and they straight out denied us. Oops. They're looking for things that are far greater in capacity, like 150 people they're accommodating for their safe sleep site. But what we wanted to urge to them is that with very little cost per bed services, while it is just overnight, we are still coming way under budget of any single one of the programs that they have to offer, like their managed camp that they've done in the past at the Benchlands and 1220 River Street. And we offer far more of a welcoming, community-oriented, safe and stable environment than those places have. That's also empowering.
Yeah, and that's why I get this is successful. It's small. It probably should be small in order to have that impact, because at some point women are going to graduate from the program and then other women come in. But what if we have in different places in Santa Cruz these kind of programs? I'm just thinking, but I don't think it is beyond the possibility. So final thoughts.
I would love to see the city, now that this has actually gone off the ground, because when we submitted the RFQ, I believe we had just started or hadn't opened yet. I would love to see this as successful to them and for them to invest in it so that we could have maybe several different types of like group home style living throughout the city, maybe even throughout on the county level, where people can cohabitate in this way and they could have even better services, like every day they have a shower instead of a shower trailer and like a full-on kitchen instead of a kitchenette. It'd be really great to see how much this could take off.
You've been listening to Kat Salehi from the Secret Garden Women's Shelter, and you can hear the program again on ksqd.org, exploring Santa-Cruz, and it will be there within the next week. Thank you so much, and I know this is the beginning, but I hope to, in a year or so, have you come back.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the volunteers and supporters for the Women's Shelter.